There are a lot of videos about prefabs already, but it is such a simple yet crucial part to Unity that I thought I should make one anyways. I quickly want to go over what they are, how to make them, and when you should use them. In this pirate scene, I have a simple coin game object with a coin script attached so that when my character comes into contact with it, the value of the coin is added to my character's total, which can be seen in the top right. Now the obvious first thing that someone might do is take that coin and copy and paste it a bunch of times so that they now have multiple coins to pick up, which will work as expected, but the reason that is not such a great idea is because once you need to make any sort of change to those coins, you need to make sure you change them all. And once you're dealing with multiple scenes, maps, and they are spread out everywhere or nested, this can become a nightmare. As you can imagine, a game where some coins look or behave differently than others would be a rather confusing experience to the player. This is a clear case where prefabs would be ideal. Prefab is short for prefabricated, which means made beforehand. And that is essentially what they are. Prefabs are already configured game objects that can be saved in your project for reuse. The things saved with your game object are transform data, any attached scripts or components, property values, and any child game objects or prefabs. Yes, prefabs can contain other prefabs. So going back to our scene, to redo our example with prefabs, all you need to do is delete all these copies and simply drag the original coin from the hierarchy into the project tab. In this case, I have already made a prefab folder for it. And that is all there is to it. The coin is now a prefab and it will display blue in the hierarchy to indicate that. So now we can copy and paste this prefab like we did before to get multiple coins again. However, this time, if we want to, for example, update the value to 5, what you would need to do is make the change to any of the prefabs in the scene and go to the top where you will see these additional dropdowns for prefabs. If you click the overrides, you will see it shows all the changes that have been made that differ from the prefab sitting in your project assets. If you click apply all, this will then update all the prefabs across your project to match. Now something to be mindful about is if you update a value on one prefab, but don't apply that change and maybe forget about it, if you later change the same value in a different prefab and click apply all, the prefab you initially changed will not receive that update because it has already overridden that value. So this is an instance where a prefab may accidentally differ from the others. So ideally always make changes to the same prefab in the scene or to the prefab in your project tab directly. Now sometimes you will want to intentionally make prefabs different, which is where you would use prefab variants. In order to create a prefab variant, you do the same thing as before, but this time drag an existing prefab from the hierarchy to the prefab folder in the project tab. This will pop up a window asking if you want this to be a new original prefab or a prefab variant. If you select prefab variant, you will notice in the hierarchy this is now a different symbol to indicate that it is a variant. On that variant, now we can change something like the material to update the appearance and change its value to be worth more, creating a more rare and valuable coin that is likely harder to find. Now the added benefit to prefab variants is that if you make changes to the original prefab, say adjust its size, those changes will still take effect on your variant as well. Whereas if you made this its own original prefab, it wouldn't. Lastly, let's talk about instantiating prefabs in code. You may not always want or have the ability to manually set up your prefabs in your scene ahead of time, but instead want to wait for a player to interact with something or an event to happen before bringing a prefab into the scene. For example, in my scene here, I have a chest with a script on it that when the player comes into contact with it, will start spawning prefabs that you have assigned in the array in intervals. So I made another coin variant that when instantiated has an applied force upward, and if we drag it into the script, then hit play and run into it, you will see it throws up coins at the player. So to recap, you should use prefabs when you need multiple of a game object, you need something to exist in multiple scenes, you want one game object's changes to be reflected in another, or you want to instantiate a game object in code. And that is the essential information to prefabs that I could think of. If you enjoyed the content, hit that like button, and if you're curious about what's next, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.